What a fun to follow the show, guys. Thank you. I'm joined here by Abby, 12 years experience in loyalty and strategy, and now working for UK retailer Argos as a lead loyalty and CRM. Mark from FT, leading, as he say, a team of gamekeepers who aim to keep the poachers aligned with using the data correctly. Rasmus, he's got his book, so you heard about him yesterday, right? So, author of the Hello First Name book, international keynote speaker, and he's the chief experience officer at Agilic, which is a customer engagement platform. And last but not least, we've got Ralph from Loyalty Juggernaut, sales and strategy. Many years of experience. And I'm Pavel Los, I'm with New World Loyalty, over 25 years of experience in loyalty, and happy to be here. Personalization or relevance, that's the title of the talk. Can you give us 1 minute take? What does that mean? What's your definition of personalization or relevance?
I can start. For me, I think personalization is data playback. You, the brand, playing data back to me, the customer. I think the best example in the market of someone who does that well is Spotify and the Spotify Unwrapped campaign that comes out every year. People actually look forward to it. I don't let my 2-year-old play music on my Spotify because she will ruin my Spotify Wrapped. I don't need that. So I think that's the best example of personalization. And for me, relevance is a brand sending me something I didn't even know I needed.
I think about it in quite simplistic terms. I think about it as when and what. So as a publisher, we get a lot of data and behavioral data about our subscribers and our readers. We can use a lot of that to trigger messaging that's relevant at a point in time, layering on and playing back some of that information, and I'll come to the Spotify example that we do at the FT, something similar. The personalization bit then kind of is the thing that often gets those communications over the line in terms of trying to get the reader to take an action, whether that's to subscribe or to engage or sign up for some other product or service for us.
Yeah, well, for me, I think the terms are, I mean, they can coexist, but they don't necessarily have to. So personalization is an act of the brand where you are consciously trying to make an above par experience for a customer based on your insights with this particular customer. So that's an act of the brand personalization, whereas relevance is really in the eye of the beholder. So who's the judge of something being relevant or not? That'll be the consumer. So I can receive an email as a consumer that is completely not personalized, yet it's super relevant because I just happen to be in the market for whatever product is being thrown at me. Or vice versa, I can have a hyper-personalized email with dog food or whatever that I should be in the market for, but my dog just died, and such the email is completely irrelevant. So one is a means to the other, and we can try and personalize to become perceived as relevant, but there's really no guarantee.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, what these guys have said already obviously kind of covers quite a lot of the topic. I would say personalization is roundabout taking customer insights and narrowing that down to kind of get the right offer, right place, right time, etc. in terms of like email communication. Relevance, I think, comes a lot around the ability to basically restrain from over-communicating, because, I mean, we find, like, we might find that our communication is personalized to the individual, but maybe they don't want to receive it on a weekly basis or on a daily basis, and to actually kind of restrain ourselves, as I say, to make sure that we do it at the right time.
So, Ralph, if I hear, and all of you, so it is not about either or, right? Is it more about, it's not about comparing them, it's more about, is personalization one of the ways to achieve relevance? Would you agree on that, Ralph?
Yes, I think you can start with using customer insight to go and get the personalization correct. The relevance is really actually about I think it's almost like, using the whole idea of empowering customers to say what communication they want and when they want it, and that makes it sort of more relevant. But that kind of involves brands being able to kind of step back and not sort of over-communicating. So it's sort of getting a balance right. I mean, the discussion yesterday, I think, from Nectar, if you're going to look at sausages, then the relevance is there, the personalization works because you're interested in kind of sausages. But if you're talking about something maybe like fashion or finance, then making sure that your message is relevant to people who maybe aren't looking at that kind of thing maybe once a year or once a month is very, very difficult to get that relevance correct.
Let's flip this on its head. I'm going to follow Ian and his comments from his fantastic session on emailing. And one of the comments on emails, I mean, because you don't need to personalize everything, right? You have a large database. Is there an example of a campaign where that actually worked and you didn't have to personalize?
Where we didn't have to personalize. Yeah. There's a little bit of personalization in this example, so I'm going to preface it with that. But when I was at Ocado, which is a online supermarket in the UK, working on their CRM team, we wanted to send out comms that were relevant to your weekly schedule when you might place your weekly shop. So what we did was we created a recipes email. We looked in the data. We looked at who might be someone with a young family based on the products that they were purchasing. We looked at people who were buying a lot of convenience products like pre-chopped veg, things like that. And we created 4 different variants of this email with different recipes. So we had 30-minute recipes for the people who were buying really convenience-based products. We had family-friendly recipes for the families. And then we had some more sort of like Ocado's quite premium, so you can buy really like fancy stuff on their bougie. We had some more like, maybe you'll do this at the weekend. And we sent the recipes email the day before they were likely to like place their next shop. Wasn't the day it was going to come, and we saw really, really, really high engagement with sending it at a relevant time. And we also had the ability to one-click add all the ingredients to the basket. So we also saw some really good ROI on sending something that was relevant to that customer at that time.
Mm-hmm. I think it's about demonstrating the loyalty scheme or the brand demonstrating, show me, you know me. Right? I bought recently swimming goggles for my daughter when we go swimming lesson. And the brand then, a couple of days later, sent me an email how to take care of her swimming goggles, right? With a couple more messages, but I actually didn't read that email, but it just kind of, that was a very relevant messaging, and there's something that actually clicks, and I actually appreciate the brand much more. What are the mistakes, Rasmus, that brands
the mistakes
can make, right?
There are many
Over-personalizing or not focusing on the relevance too much.
So in terms of over-personalizing, I think most brands are totally not there yet. So if you are really afraid of getting too personal or being too relevant, there's a pretty fair chance that you're nowhere near that point. Another mistake could be not fixing the table stake things you need, the prerequisites for actually doubling down on personalization. So if your value proposition is a bit off, or if you have a brand that is not well known enough, if you don't have the brand awareness and the demand, then personalization is not going to solve that for you. And also, I would say, forgetting creativity, forgetting content, becoming too myopic and too focused on data and data pipeline, whereas you'll then be forgetting the creativity and the different ways that you can engage people emotionally, which will ultimately create a feeling of relevance, which is what you should be after. Mm-hmm. To name a few. There are many, though. Yeah.
Want to add anything? Any mistakes from your experience?
I think what some brands do is they kind of, and I'm sure nobody in this room would do that, but they sort of overemphasize that the importance they have possibly in the kind of customer's mind. So they think so therefore they don't realize that quite often they're a little bit irrelevant to what the customer's doing, and they're quite like a brand, but they don't want to be talked to about that brand quite so often. I think the mistakes are to avoid just to try and sell too much. I think that's interesting. If you can use, games or partners or information or additional follow-up to remain relevant without actually kind of selling, I think that's a very useful tool, which kind of maybe a lot of brands don't use quite as much as they could.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to do a proper personalization, you obviously need data, right? So Mark, do you think that the marketers actually overestimate the amount of information they know about their customers? Do they know their customers really?
So if you're not familiar with Financial Times, we're a pay-for news media company, so we have a paywall model. So actually we have a huge amount of behavioral data about our users. We know what articles they're reading on what devices, the degree to which they complete those articles, you know, what newsletters they subscribe to. We're very much trying to encourage people to have a mindset of just because you have the data and very rich data doesn't mean you have to use it at every opportunity. So, as Abby mentioned, the Spotify Wrapped, we have a similar thing which we've done for the past 5 or 6 years, your year with FT. So we surface a lot of that data back to our readers. They love it. They love seeing they're in the top X% of readers and what topics and sections they've read, how many newsletters they get, etc. And to your previous questions about mistakes, we're having some interesting conversations at the minute about whether to do more of that kind of activity. Just because we have that data, there's a real appetite to do much more with that data, surface it back up to users, make it super personalized. And I have a slight fear that we might over-egg that, because actually it takes a lot of work in the background to get our data stack in such a place that we can get a lot of that data up to our teams and our platforms to be able to use it. You know, at the other end of the scale, something like an onboarding program where actually you don't have a huge amount of data on users because they're quite new, the degree to which that program's successful with limited personalization is also really positive, because a lot of people come to the FT and they kind of have a perception of what it is. Actually, when they come, we offer a lot more than they actually realize. So being able to present that back up to people who don't know about those features in a relevant but non-personalized way is really valuable for us, because we get a huge amount of engagement from people who sign up to email newsletters, and a lot of people aren't aware of them. And so trying to get them to sign up to more of them is sort of like really important. So you kind of have complementary topics, so you can use some of that behavioral data to target them. And back to a point I think we were talking about in terms of over-contacting, you know, that's a massive risk for our product and our engagement actually, because that channel forms a really important part of our kind of product experience and product mix. So if we kind of are over-communicating to try and upsell or drive engagement, we kind of risk the engagement through those channels. So yeah, we kind of walk quite a fine line with that.
Rasmus, you want to follow?
Yeah, I think there's an important distinction between data and insights, because you can have a lot of data, but if you're not really finding out what it matters for the customer lifecycle or how it correlates with what you're trying to achieve, then you could be missing out. So really making sure that you're boiling down all the data that you have into actual insights, and that you interpret those based on the context within which your value proposition is built, and then correlating that or putting that into how you then decide on which content to show. And I think in terms of loyalty and in the sphere of loyalty, content can be indeed both your product recommendations or your content recommendations, as it would be in your case, Mark. It could also be the creative messaging. And this is really where I see that we are moving towards scaling actually the personalized messaging. I mean, we've been able to scale the product recommendations for ages, but really scaling the creative messaging. I think we saw some beautiful examples of also that yesterday, of how you can actually stir up different emotions through the messages and creating that. So matching that with the insights is really what I believe personalization is when you boil it down.
But then in your content crisis manifesto, you talk about the challenge of scaling of that personalized content, right? So how do you do it in a big scale? Right? How do these guys kind of not get trapped in that complexity of that scale?
Yeah, so I think generative AI has come to help us with that in part, because I think the idea here is that you're trying to convey a message. Say that you are having a customer that is about to churn, and you want to try and get them back, for instance. So that's essentially an anti-churn message, but you'll be having this in in so many different variants per segment, even per individual. If we're moving a bit closer into the future and we're not too picky about our brand, you'll be having that in different versions per channel, and you might also be having that same message in different languages as well. So that gives you a multitude of variants of the same message, essentially. So unless you have the proper tools to help you make all those different variants and to do QA of those variants and have a content model in your execution tool that supports that, you could very well end up in a situation where you have 100 semi-identical messages and emails and flows that will just make it a nightmare to sort of manage over time. So having that technology in place, deploying generative AI in a sound manner, I think that's where we should be heading, and that's what we're going to see more of in the future.
Got 5 minutes. I mean, originally it was supposed to be 45 minutes, so we need to take it slowly to a close. But if you can just all of you kind of tell us the top 3 metrics on how do you actually measure that you are doing this well, right? How do you judge that when you deploy personalized content that this actually works, and you are driving that engagement and the relevance?
Yeah, so at Argos, we do measure every campaign based on ROI, sales uplift, engagement, all the classic CRM engagement models. We've recently introduced into the business something called the Matrix. It sounds very fancy. It's not. It's 9 grids. But it's looking at our entire customer base, and it's just looking at, on one axis, CRM engagement, and the other axis, Nectar engagement. And it's pairing those two up to say, where on the matrix do you sit customer? Bottom left-hand corner is sort of the worst customers. Top right-hand corner is the best customers, and in the middle are everybody in between. And what we're doing now is focusing our strategy and our measurement across a year on looking at how many customers can we move out of group 1 and up and over the matrix, rather than, yes, we need to report to the business that we drove X ROI and X uplift on this email and it did really well, and yay, go us, go team, but also looking at it from a really holistic picture to say, over the course of this financial year, we moved X amount of customers out of this non-contactable space into a contactable space, and that is now delivering us X amount of profit. We know customers higher up are more profitable than customers lower down. And so we're shifting this financial year into more of a long-term measurement, which is exciting from a CRM and loyalty manager's point of view.
We're actually using one of our product-based metrics as a kind of proxy for the degree to which we are kind of getting it right in terms of personalization. So we have a feature on our website and on our app called MyFT. So you can, if you're reading an article about Trump, there's a button there. You can follow Trump, should you so wish. And that will to some degree personalize your experience of the website and the app in terms of, we'll surface some of that content a bit more prominently. We may sign you up to an email digest about anything, kind of any articles Trump related. And so what we look at is the number of topics that someone is following and whether that is changing. And if it sort of starts trending downwards because someone's followed so many topics that they're getting they're disappearing down a bit of their own rabbit hole and getting too much of that kind of personalized content based on what they've told us, then we know that we're kind of overdoing it from a personalization perspective, because we want people to kind of be able to easily access the content that they are interested in through those follows, but we don't want them to kind of turn them off because they're not getting the FT view of the world, they're just getting their own kind of view of what's interesting for them.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it short. So I think a term that I like to introduce is called personalization accountability. So unless you're measuring the difference between the personalized version of whatever you're doing against a control group, someone from IT will come and decommission your MarTech and your team, by the way. And how do you then establish this personalization accountability? I think common denominator between what you said is that we're focusing on customer metrics. So basically we're measuring on the customer. We're not measuring on the campaign. We're not necessarily measuring on the channel per se, but we're tallying that up in customer metrics, looking towards how do we do things that make our customers have a higher customer lifetime value, and what are the leading indicators, what are the proxy metrics that we can monitor and that we can change on a short-term basis that we know from data analytics will increase the CLV on a long-term basis. I think that's probably as short as I could keep it.
I'll have to keep it even shorter. I know a few clients who have looked at this kind of this issue and challenge is they've basically looked at the whole idea I mentioned earlier about empowerment. So in terms of speaking to members and saying how often do they want to be communicated to, what channels and what subjects, and then over time asking permission to increase that number. And if the answer to that is yes, I'd like to, as opposed to no, stop, reduce it even further. But that kind of the different, if those people actually were prepared to receive more communications of a broader range of subjects, that means that they're actually be getting the relevance correct. If they want to dial it down, then obviously we're not. So that's a good way of checking engagement and relevance, etc. So that's it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Abby, Mark, Rasmus, Ralph, and I'm Pavel. And we are off to a break.